Because of the civil-military fusion that exists, virtually any company in China is basically part of their defense industrial complex. They are. And we've seen that repeatedly over and over again. And we've seen advances that the Chinese have made in their own defensive capabilities and offensive capabilities militarily as a result of technology transfers. So it is among the highest of priorities for this administration to protect against that. There are countries in this world where we've invested a lot of money, I mean a lot of money, in humanitarian assistance, even in development assistance. And so you go and you hear about these countries, we feed people, we take care of their medical systems, we even help them build their security services, but all the minerals contracts are with China, all of the other benefits are with China. There's got to be some situation here where we say, hold on a second, there has to be some relationship between the amount of help we give and what the United States is getting out of it. By the way, all of their help is primarily loans. So they lend you money that you pay them back so you can hire Chinese companies to do work in their country with Chinese workers.
It was a privilege to work together with you on issues related to China when you were in the Senate, and I'm excited to do so again in your new capacity, especially as you undertake this much-needed reorganization of the department. And following up on your earlier testimony and statement, you rightly identified China and the Chinese Communist Party as a principal threat to the United States. And for decades, as part of its strategy of civil-military fusion, the CCP has stolen intellectual property to stand up its state-owned enterprises and build up its military. It's constantly working to evade export controls to get cutting-edge and legacy chips to leapfrog the U.S. in the AI race and to supply its missile systems. We cannot give the CCP the means to displace the United States. Recently, the Department of Commerce rescinded the overly complex AI diffusion rule, which it intended to cement our lead in AI technology by limiting U.S. chip sales, particularly to countries that may allow Chinese entities access. As Secretary of State, you have a vital role in protecting dual-use technologies from being used by America's adversaries. I wanted to ask you, how do you see the replacement to the diffusion rule taking shape, and what guardrails do you think are needed to prevent China from siphoning more U.S. innovation to build up its military?
Well, as you know, the Commerce Department is undertaking a review of the previous administration's decisions with regards to specific countries and also specific technologies. And so we're providing guidance for them on that regard, or we're providing input. Ultimately, they're the ones that will have to do that. We've heard from a lot of partner nations, some who feel they were unfairly treated in that decision, others who feel we're happy with the outcome. So I know some of those decisions are ongoing, but it's the highest priority. The fact that we have to assume that basically every country or any company that operates in communist China is under the control of the CCP. They can be an independent company. They can argue that they're a corporate entity that's not related to the government. But the truth of the matter is that based on their national security law in China, every company has to do whatever the government tells them to do and turn over any technologies they tell them to turn over. In addition to that, because of the civil-military fusion that exists, virtually any company in China is basically part of their defense industrial complex. They are. And we've seen that repeatedly over and over again. And we've seen advances that the Chinese have made in their own defensive capabilities and offensive capabilities militarily as a result of technology transfers. So it is among the highest of priorities for this administration to protect against that. And frankly, it's also an issue that I raise with every one of my engagement with our partners. It was a big topic of conversation at the recent foreign ministers gathering of NATO last week in Turkey. So a growing number of our allies are also interested in similar moves on their front.
Well, thank you very much for raising that issue, because as you know, the acquiring U.S. technology through third parties is something China is actively trying to do. There are also national security concerns with Chinese nationals coming to the United States to study at our colleges and universities, since the CCP has previously threatened some students' families if they don't spy for them. And there have been instances, including in my home state of Michigan, where Chinese nationals studying in the U.S. engaged in trespassing on a military base. What can the State Department do to protect our college campuses and improve the vetting of Chinese nationals who come to the U.S. to study?
I mean, it's not a difficult issue. I mean, it's difficult in the sense that where I think we as a people are generally uncomfortable with saying an entire group of people from one country cannot come. On the other hand, it's hard for us to ignore the repeated and large number of industrial, commercial, and educational research and intellectual property theft being tracked back to primarily graduate students from China. Now, on the one end, you can sort of vet it at the front end, and there are some that have had links prior to their studies in this country to the intelligence services or military services. Those are easy to take out. But the others are more complicated, and that is someone who could be threatened because their family's back home. And in many cases, some of these students do not consider what they're doing to be espionage. They consider it totally sort of acceptable that if you come across a secret or something that's valuable, you would bring it back home to your country. So it's a huge challenge, and it's one that we take very seriously, and it's one that's under consideration now. In fact, there's an interagency conversation happening on different proposals to address it, but it's one I've been raising for years, especially with our institutes of higher education in our country. So let me just talk to you about the goal here. Our foreign policy has to once again return to the national interests. That's what it needs to be built on. We need to define what the national interest is. What is good for America? That doesn't mean we don't care about the world. That doesn't mean we don't care about great causes on this planet. But it means that when it comes to the conduct of foreign policy, whether it's the policies we stake out or the dollars we're spending, it has to be aligned to a defined national interest. What is in it for America? Now, you could argue that alliances are in it for America. You can argue, and we can, that in some cases humanitarian assistance or development assistance and all these sorts of things are in our national interest. And we're going to continue to make that argument. We are going to continue to be the world's most generous provider of humanitarian assistance, of food assistance, of development assistance, way more than any other country. We already are, and we're going to continue to be, but we're going to do it differently. We're going to do it differently, and we have to do it differently because we are engaged in a very different world than the one that existed 30 years ago or 40 years ago, or in some places 50 years ago when some of these programs were set up. So there are two things that I want to focus on today in the 3 minutes that I have or less here with you. Obviously, we'll get into your questions. The first is the reorganization of the State Department. It is not designed to either cripple the department or in any way, it's not even a cost savings endeavor. It is more about being able to deliver results in a better way. What we want to empower is our regional bureaus and our embassies. Here's how I want this. This is how we want this to work. We want to be able to go to our, let me back up. The most important thing I read every single day, every morning I get a book with 10 or 15 cables from our embassies around the world. The best ideas, the best innovations that I get from our building, and this is not disrespectful to the people working here in Washington, is from the embassies and from the cables. They are identifying problems and opportunities well in advance of some memo that works its way to me. We want to get back to a situation, or we want to get to a situation where we are empowering ideas and action at the embassy level and through our regional bureaus. Those are literally the front lines of American diplomacy. And so we have structured a State Department that can deliver on that. The second thing, and included in, is to understand the full toolbox available to us to advance the national interests. And in the past, unfortunately, humanitarian assistance and development assistance and AID and what the State Department does have in some cases been unrelated, in other cases have found themselves to be in conflict. So what I want and what we want is for our regional bureaus to have available to them aid, diplomacy, economic development, all of these different tools in the toolbox of statecraft and tailored to the specific country and or region based on our national interest. That's what we seek to deliver on. And that's why we wanted, and by the way, I'm not the first Secretary of State, multiple Secretaries of State, starting with Condoleezza Rice, I believe Secretary Albright herself, and others privately have wanted to bring AID and all of it underneath the fold of the State Department so that aid is provided through the context of our broader foreign policy. And I want to be frank with you about this as well. There are a lot of great causes in the world, but we don't have unlimited resources. We never have and we never will. And even though we spend more than anybody else, these resources have to be tailored as part of a broader strategy. And frankly, they have to have some return on the United States as well. There are countries in this world where we've invested a lot of money, I mean a lot of money, in humanitarian assistance, even in development assistance. And so you go and you hear about these countries, we feed people, we take care of their medical systems, we even help them build their security services, but all the minerals contracts are with China, all of the other benefits are with China. There's got to be some situation here where we say, hold on a second, there has to be some relationship between the amount of help we give and what the United States is getting out of it. That includes their votes in international organizations. There are countries we have poured billions of dollars into over the year who consistently vote against our interests in international relations. You know who doesn't do that? You know who doesn't tolerate that? China doesn't tolerate that. They don't tolerate that. All of their help is leveraged. By the way, all of their help is primarily loans. So they lend you money that you pay them back so you can hire Chinese companies to do work in their country with Chinese workers. That's what they call aid. And that's what they still call aid. So the purpose here is to structure a State Department and ultimately that can deliver on the foreign, on the national interest of the United States, driven at our regional bureaus. We are not withdrawing from the world. We are not withdrawing from foreign aid, but we're going to engage in the world, and we're going to conduct foreign aid and foreign assistance in a way that furthers the national interest. Not only do I look forward to working with you, I have to work with you because you are the appropriators, and you are the ones that write the budgets, and you are the appropriations bills. And by the way, we're welcome to taking input through this process. We need that input because our intention here is to leave something behind that is good, not something that is counterproductive or in some ways does something unintended that's negative. Thank you.